The widow of Alexei Navalny's vowed to continue his work to fight for a Russia free of Putin, hinting she could take on his political fight for change in the country.
Yulia Navalny also claims she knew exactly, or rather knows exactly, why Putin killed Alexei 3 days ago, releasing a video saying authorities are refusing to allow any family members to see the body for 2 weeks.
My
husband was unbreakable, and that's exactly why Putin killed him. Shamefully, cowardly, without ever looking him in the eye or even mentioning his name. And just as vile and cowardly, they are now hiding his body. They're not showing it, not giving it to his mother, and they are pathetically lying and waiting for the traces of yet another of Putin's Novichoks to disappear there.
Joining us now is Mike Baker, a former CIA officer, joined us from Idaho. Thank you so much for your time. A really incredibly composed, passionate statement from her with some extremely concerning claims. What did you make of the things she had to say?
Yeah, I mean, she's composed because she's had to deal with this for some time now, right? I mean, this was, I hate to say it, but this was absolutely unsurprising that this sad story ended with Navalny's death. The fact that they're not releasing the body and the fact that they said that it was down to sudden death syndrome, which is what they called it, that there were bruises on the head and the chest, which they said were the result of seizures. Originally, their story was he collapsed after going for a walk. Look, he was being held in one of the most brutal penal colonies, the IK3, the polar wolf penal colony in Siberia. On a 30-year sentence. So it's pathetic. I think more pathetic is some of the headlines that are coming out now saying, well, now with Navalny's death, what's next for Russia? As if something's going to change, or as if this is the first dissident or opponent that Putin has had killed. He's got a very successful track record in that result.
I mean, Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us from Idaho. I'm totally with you, and people think I'm being cynical. It will change absolutely nothing. Of course he was poisoned. I'd like to throw at you what ex-Rear Admiral Chris Parry said last night, which we just played in the news. He said he's not altogether sure this is Putin. There might well be a political vacuum inside the Kremlin with the presidential elections on the way. He believes this could be people manoeuvring either for favours or people manoeuvring to get Putin blamed. I'm with you, though. It doesn't make any damn difference. He's a dictator. But do you think there's any strength in that argument at all, Mike?
I think. Look, he's very smart, but I think he might be overthinking this situation. Mm-hmm. Whether we're talking about Litvinenko themselves, or we're talking about Sergei Skripal, it doesn't really matter. This is Putin's hand behind all of this. And as far as the election goes, coming up in March, I know the world is on the edge of its seat wondering who might win that election. But yeah, this is Putin's doing.
In terms of what happens next, Mike, and Yulia wanting to sort of take up the mantle from her husband, how difficult is that to be such a dissenting, critical, opposing voice of Putin when you look at what's happened to Navalny?
Same will happen to her.
Yeah, but it's exactly. I think, that's part of the danger there. They'll find a way to quiet her. But look, the idea that the headlines that came out shortly after news of Navalny's death started to leak out were, Putin, most prominent critic silenced. It's not that he was the most prominent critic. He was basically one of the last standing vocal critics. Right? It's just, there are critics of the Putin regime, but they're very silent, right? They don't dare because they've seen what happens when you try to stand up against Putin. And yes, his regime is cadre around him, right? He doesn't operate in a vacuum. So I give Yulia a lot of credit. She's a very brave woman, and she'll stand up and try to carry on this fight. I don't think it's going to be particularly effective, unfortunately.
The other thing I was going to ask you was, and a really good point from the researchers this morning, they talk about how the world should respond. The world's going to make no difference to Vladimir Putin. I'm sorry if that sounds cynical. Russia is the most sanctioned country on earth, Mike, right? More than Iran, even more than North Korea. It would be fair to say that the West strategy does not work at all. It doesn't make any difference to Vladimir Putin, does it?
Right. No, and it certainly hasn't in the past couple of years. I think there was this feeling that somehow we were going to sanction him out of the Ukraine invasion, out of the Ukraine war. The reality here is that the Russian government has more cash in their coffers than they've had in some time now. They've found ways, particularly in the energy business, and developing sort of a shadow shipping industry to move oil around. They've found ways to beat the sanctions. And I will say some of the sanctions are pretty ineffective. This price cap idea that, well, the world won't buy any oil, above $60 a barrel from Russia. It's nonsense. Traders are out there trading Russian oil at top prices because, they're moving it from tanker to tanker. They're getting around a lot of the Russian oil, frankly, once it's refined, makes its way to the U.S. So these sanctions have been fairly ineffective. And Putin's got all the cash he needs to continue this war.
In terms of how the world does respond, I mean, there's this huge $60 billion package of aid to Ukraine, military support that's been held up in Congress. The US have got to work out how serious they are about actually helping Ukraine and hurting Putin. And that could change really significantly if Donald Trump becomes the president.
Yeah, this is a very difficult time right now for Zelensky. Luckily, look, Europe stepped up. Once they got Viktor Orban on side from Hungary, and he didn't block it any further. There was a 54 billion euro aid package that was pushed through. As you pointed out, there's an aid package that's kind of in limbo right now that was proposed by the U.S. Senate. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere in the Congress, which has to take it up in order for it to move forward. The Congress has now just over the past day or so put forward their own version of an aid bill. I think that one may actually have some possibilities because it includes something that the Republicans have been vying for, which is money for the U.S. border security down south in Mexico. So I think that might actually happen. But you're right. Looking at it from a distance, it's a very dysfunctional situation in the U.S. right now. Right? It's so partisan that nothing really seems to get accomplished in Washington, D.C., up on Capitol Hill. And what may happen, in the next election, and as you pointed out, if there's a change in administrations, it's anybody's guess. So Zelensky has every right to sit there and worry about where this war is going to go. He cannot win a war of attrition against Russia.
Interesting, Mike, finally as well, front of our Daily Telegraph today, US moves to block Israeli offensive. The world knows about the Israelis' plan, the IDF's for Rafah, which they think might be as soon as tomorrow, the 1.2 million people that have been moved north to south. I always worked on the assumption that Israel would do what America told it. It doesn't seem, unless we're missing the point this side of the pond, Biden's made noises, probably been told to make those noises, but made noises. Israel seems to be hell-bent on doing this. Do you think that Biden is... Do you think he can stop this invasion, or do you think actually no, it makes no difference now?
Yeah, I think there's a complicated relationship between the Biden administration and the Israeli government at this point. There's some daylight there. And I think part of it is because of the November election here in the U.S. The Biden administration, the Democrats and the White House, they see the pushback they're getting from their far left, right, from the progressives on the left side of the Democratic Party that are very upset with the support that Biden has given Israel so far. And so they're pushing back. And the last thing the White House can afford to do in a tight race is to lose the youth vote, which is over there on the progressive side, and also the Arab American vote, which is important in some swing states like a place like Michigan. So part of this is the Biden administration, I think, is making some national security and some foreign policy decisions based on domestic politics. I don't know that that's a particularly good idea.
Really interesting, Mike. One-word answer. Does Trump become the next president of the United States of America?
Here's my one-word answer. Wow.
Yeah, well, there you are. I tell people in this country, you think we're in a mess? My God, Biden or Trump, there's a thought. Former CIA agent Mike Baker, thank you so much indeed for joining us this morning.